It was a Friday, just before a long holiday weekend in the United States. Shoppers in Sweden were filling their carts at Coop supermarkets when suddenly the cash registers just stopped. They went dark. The payment systems failed, and soon the automatic doors wouldn't even open. 800 stores were forced to close. At the same time, the Swedish railway system hit the brakes. Trains stopped running. In New Zealand, kindergartens and schools sent urgent messages to parents. We have to close. This wasn't a power grid failure. It wasn't a series of bizarre coincidences. This was a coordinated global catastrophe, and it all happened in less than 2 seconds. That's how long it took for a single piece of malicious code to ripple across the planet, crippling an estimated 1,500 businesses in 17 different countries. It was one of the largest ransomware attacks in history, and it was all made possible by a single devastating flaw known as CVE 2021-30116. This is the story of how a tool designed to help IT professionals manage their networks became the perfect weapon for cyber criminals. The company at the center of this storm was Kaseya. They make a product called VSA, or Virtual System Administrator. Think of it as the ultimate remote control for IT departments. It allows a managed service provider, or MSP, to monitor, update, and fix problems on thousands of computers for hundreds of different clients, all from one central dashboard. It's incredibly powerful and efficient. It has deep, trusted access into every system it touches. And that trust is exactly what the attackers exploited. The attackers were a notorious ransomware group known as Revo. And they had found a secret entrance, a zero-day vulnerability. The term zero-day means the software vendor, in this case Kaseya, has 0 days to fix the problem before it's actively exploited by attackers. It's the worst case scenario in cybersecurity. So what was this secret entrance? It's almost laughably simple. The vulnerability, officially named CVE 2021-30116, was basically an unlocked door with the key hanging right next to it. In the Kaseya VSA software, there was a web page called dl.asp. This page was supposed to help with downloading agents, but it had a fatal flaw. It didn't require any authentication. Anyone on the internet could access it. When a new computer was set up with the Kaseya software, a little configuration file was created. Inside this file were credentials, a username and a password that the agent used to talk to the VSA server. The attackers figured out that they could just visit this public dl.asp page, trigger a fake login attempt, and the server would cough up those credentials. Once they had these credentials, it was game over. They could log in just like a legitimate administrator, gaining a valid session. This allowed them to bypass other security measures, including, in some cases, two-factor authentication. It gave them the keys to the kingdom. And this wasn't the only flaw. Researchers later found a whole cluster of vulnerabilities working together. But this authentication bypass was the linchpin. It was the crack in the dam that allowed the flood to pour through. The severity of this vulnerability was rated a 9.8 out of 10 by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Other organizations like MITRE gave it a perfect 10.0. This wasn't just bad, it was critically, fundamentally broken. And REvil knew exactly what to do with it. They didn't just attack one company, they executed a supply chain attack. Instead of hacking 1,500 different businesses one by one, they hacked the one tool they all trusted, their Kaseya VSA server. Here's how it worked. The attackers used the vulnerability to gain access to the VSA servers run by these IT service providers. Then they used Kaseya's own software update mechanism to push out a malicious payload. They disguised their ransomware as a legitimate Kaseya VSA agent hotfix. The file name was agent.exe, and it was deployed to a standard Kaseya working directory. It looked completely normal. So for every IT administrator and every end user at these 1,500 companies, it just looked like a routine update was being installed. But in reality, it was REvil's ransomware encrypting every file it could touch. It spread from the MSP to all of their clients simultaneously. One victim later reported that the entire process, from the initial breach to full network encryption, took less than 2 seconds. It was devastatingly efficient. The impact was immediate and chaotic. We talked about the 800 Coop supermarkets in Sweden. They couldn't process payments for days. But the damage went so much further. Schools in New Zealand, public administration offices in Romania, dentists, accounting firms, small businesses of every kind. REvil themselves boasted on their dark web blog that they had infected over 1 million individual systems. Imagine being the owner of one of those small businesses. You come into work on a Monday morning to find every single computer displaying a ransom note. Your customer data, your financials, your entire operation, gone. And the IT company you pay to protect you is the one who inadvertently delivered the poison pill. That's the insidious nature of a supply chain attack. It turns trust into a weapon. And then came the demand. For individual businesses, the ransoms were in the tens of thousands of dollars. But REvil had a bigger offer. They posted a public message offering a universal decryptor, a single key that could unlock all 1 million affected systems for a staggering price. $70 million, paid in Bitcoin, of course. It was one of the largest ransom demands ever made public. So, a flawless execution, a massive impact, and a $70 million price tag. But here's where the story takes a fascinating turn and starts to feel more like a spy thriller than a tech story. Was this really a 0 day in the traditional sense? The timeline gets a little blurry, and it reveals a frantic, hidden race that was happening behind the scenes. It turns out the REvil gang wasn't the only group that found this vulnerability. On the other side of the world, a non-profit organization called the Dutch Institute for Vulnerability Disclosure, or DIVD, had also discovered the exact same set of flaws. A researcher there named Ritsa Boonstra found the vulnerabilities and, following the rules of responsible disclosure, privately reported them to Kaseya around the end of June 2021. Kaseya acknowledged the report and started working on a patch. They were doing the right thing, but they were in a race against an enemy they didn't even know existed. Evidence suggests that Revo discovered the vulnerability independently at almost the exact same time. They began preparing their attack. Then, something happened that forced their hand. According to threat intelligence firm Flashpoint, Revo noticed that Kaseya had quietly patched its own cloud-based SaaS customers. This was a canary in the coal mine. The attackers realized that Kaseya knew about the flaw. They knew a patch for the on-premises servers, the ones they planned to target, was imminent. It was now or never. They had to rush their operation, weaponizing the exploit and launching it against every vulnerable on-premises server they could find before the patch was released and their window of opportunity closed forever. This mutual discovery scenario explains the speed and aggression of the attack. They weren't just exploiting a flaw, they were racing against the clock. It might also explain the massive $70 million ransom. Perhaps they felt this was their one big shot, so they had to make it count. This frenzy of activity happened over the July 4th holiday weekend in the US, a classic tactic for cybercriminals who know that IT departments are often running on a skeleton crew. Kaseya, realizing a massive attack was underway, made a drastic move. They urged all of their on-premises customers to immediately shut down their VSA servers, pull the plug, take them offline completely. It was a stunning admission of the severity of the situation. For days, the advice was simple: stay offline until a patch is ready. On July 11th, Kaseya finally released the patch, version 9.5.7a, that fixed CVE-2021-30116 and the other associated vulnerabilities. But for 1,500 businesses, it was too late. Their systems were already encrypted, and they were staring at ransom notes. They were stuck. Pay the ransom, try to restore from backups, or wait and hope for a miracle. And then another twist. On July 22nd, about 3 weeks after the attack, Kaseya made a startling announcement. They had obtained a universal decryptor. They claimed they got it from a trusted third party and were now distributing it to their affected customers for free. This was huge news, but it raised so many questions. Who was this mysterious third party? Did someone pay the $70 million ransom? Kaseya insisted they didn't. Did law enforcement somehow seize the keys from Revo's servers? It was a possibility. At the same time, Revo's dark web infrastructure suddenly went offline. The gang just vanished. For a while, anyway. The leading theory, which was later confirmed by the FBI, is that law enforcement had successfully compromised Revo's infrastructure and managed to obtain the decryption key. They played their hand brilliantly, waiting until Kaseya's victims could use the key before revealing their actions. It was a major win for the good guys, but it came after weeks of chaos and millions of dollars in damages and lost productivity for the victims. So what can we learn from this massive, globe-spanning attack that started with a single, unsecured web page? The Kaseya incident was a brutal wake-up call about the dangers of the software supply chain. It proved that your security is only as strong as the security of your most trusted vendor. The first and most obvious lesson is to patch, and patch quickly. Kaseya released the fix, and every organization that failed to apply it remained a sitting duck. But it goes deeper than that. Kaseya themselves issued a list of hardening recommendations that are now standard practice for anyone using this kind of powerful remote management tool. First, implement multi-factor authentication everywhere. This adds another layer of defense that can stop an attacker even if they manage to steal a password. Second, don't expose administrative interfaces directly to the public internet. Put them behind a VPN. This is like putting your front door inside a locked building instead of right on the street. It dramatically reduces your attack surface. Third, use IP allow listing. This means configuring your server to only accept connections from a pre-approved list of IP addresses, like your office or your technicians' homes. If the connection is coming from anywhere else, it's automatically blocked. These aren't just suggestions. They are necessities in the modern threat landscape. The R-Evil attack on Kaseya wasn't necessarily sophisticated in its technical execution. The vulnerability itself was quite simple. The sophistication was in the strategy, identifying a single point of failure in the supply chain that would provide explosive, instant access to thousands of downstream victims. The attackers exploited the inherent trust that is built into our digital infrastructure. They turned a tool of administration into a weapon of mass disruption. The story of CVE 2021301116 is a stark reminder that in our interconnected world, a single vulnerability discovered by the wrong people at the right time can have consequences that ripple out across the globe, shutting down everything from supermarkets to schools in the blink of an eye. It proves that the front line of cybersecurity is no longer just your own firewall, but the security of every single piece of software you trust. This event changed the conversation around supply chain security forever. If you found this breakdown interesting, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the biggest events shaping our digital world. And let me know in the comments what you think was the most shocking part of the Kaseya saga. Thanks for watching.